All right, hey friends, it's Jeff. I'm with my good friend Tyler Zacks. Tyler is, and you've heard me say this before, one of the most inventive people in Enneagram world. Consistently is pushing the tech of and overlap of Enneagram material together and doing just outstanding stuff for the rest of us. He is doing another summit in October 21st through the 24th at the enneasummit.com. And this one is on midlife and talking about aging, talking about wisdom, talking about what generations can say to one another. And so, Tyler, I'm thrilled to have you. And we're going to get into some good stuff today.
It is always a good time when I get to hang out with my friend Jeff.
Quick plug, how many guests do you have for the Ennea Summit this time?
I've interviewed 20 speakers, many of them world-class speakers, and 37 panelists. So quite a few people coming to listen to at the summit.
Having 20 folks, informed Enneagram folks, talking on the same topic, in the same space, the similar themes, just such a treasury. But last time Tyler did a summit, it was on the instincts, and he did some panels which were just gold, and I imagine they'll be the same this time. Just really excited to see that. Now, just one bad note on this front, I wasn't invited to be part of the Midlife Summit this time, and that's either because I lack wisdom or I'm just so young. I'm deciding which of those I'm opting for, but
yes,
let the listener decide.
It's not for lack of wisdom. I really, really wanted to create space, especially for those sages that are 60s, 70s, 80s, for the panels and for speaking. I made a few exceptions for some people who had written some great curriculum already on midlife and beyond that are maybe in their 50s, but tried to get people who have a lot of lived experience. And so you're going to get a lot of just really good wisdom from people who have, gone through a lot. And the panels are really kind of the heart of the whole summit, I think. We have some incredible panelists, Terry Saraceno and Peter O'Hanrahan. They're really well-known narrative Enneagram teachers. Michael Naylor, he's an Enneagram Institute teacher with Ruts Hudson. He's on the Type 4 panel. We got Dr. Jerry Wagner, the WEPS Enneagram test creator, Enneagram 5. So we have some incredible people bringing their wisdom to the table. And do you know what panel was my favorite this time?
Do tell.
The Enneagram 7s. The stereotype is that, they're running from pain. They're kind of shallow. I mean, that's the stereotype of 7s. Mm-hmm. But when you get around these 7s that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, I was blown away, almost to the point of tears, of how deep this panel discussion went. So I'm just excited for people to listen to the 7 panel and all the panels, but especially the 7, because it was one of my favorites.
Well, midlife, my man. Midlife, you wrote in one email that midlife has a branding problem, which made me laugh. So how would you reframe what people in their 40s and 70s through their 70s? I suppose that's midlife, isn't it? Like, what is midlife? Was the 45th?
That was one of the surprises for me, because I was doing a pre-summit poll, and somebody said, I'm in midlife, and I'm going through these things, and I looked at their age, and they said 67. Uh-huh. And I was like, what? Because I'm 43, and I'm like, well, I'm in midlife. You're old. I couldn't be more wrong, because as I dove into this topic, 40s, 50s, and 60s is midlife. 60s, being 60 is the new 40. Mm-hmm. And that just blew me away. Because I had, a woman named Anne. She's 83, and she was on my Type 8 panel, and she's full of energy, and she's coaching with the Enneagram. And I'm like, wow, 60 is young. 60 is still midlife. People are still reinventing themselves and doing things and trying new things and experimenting in their 60s. And it very much still is midlife, because I think boomers are going to live 20 years longer than their parents. And so I talked to, Dr. Griffin, who's a pastor in Chicago, and he says he has many 90-year-olds in his congregation. So people are living longer, which means we have decades of more life to to live and to try new things. And so this whole idea of retirement in your 60s is just not true anymore. People aren't retiring; they're refiring, is what I've been told. And so that was just mind-boggling to me, diving into this summit, because I really didn't want to do this summit, because I don't like to think about being over the hill now that I'm 43, and because it does have a branding problem. That was Chip Conley's words, because midlife is often associated with the word crisis, going through a midlife crisis. And that actually came from a psychoanalyst, Elliot Jacques, if I can pronounce that, from pronouncing that right, in 1965. So that's where the term came from. Was he did an essay on one of his patients, and one of his patients explained feeling like he was over the hill. He said, up until now, life has seemed like an endless upward slope with nothing but the distant horizon in view. Now suddenly I feel like I've reached the crest of the hill, and ahead lies a downward slope with the end of the road and even death in my sight. So that was really, that patient caused Elliot Jacques to coin the phrase midlife crisis in 1965. It's had a branding problem ever since then. And if I'm honest, I wasn't thinking of the second half of life too positively. I've been sort of filled with, regrets about the first half of life, wondering if this is all there is to look forward to. And to my surprise, I've realized that the second half of life is actually a better half. And the stats show that. Because have you heard of the U curve of happiness, Jeff?
I'm familiar with at least the fact that there's a lot of positivity from most folks after they turn 40, and that it keeps going up. But tell me,
how did I not know that?
Yeah, it's a secret. Everybody's keeping it to themselves.
I mean, I just thought you hit a midlife crisis and then it was sort of a downward slope from there. But researchers have found that on average, people's reported life satisfaction, follows a U-shaped curve throughout their life. So it's high satisfaction peaks in the late teens and 20s, and then declines in the 40s and 50s, but then later rebounds when you get to your 60s, 70s, and later. And so this, research directly contradicts our stereotypes about aging, that it's a decline rather than an ascent. And the stats show that it's an ascent, that you actually get happier as you get older. And so that's why I think, especially your audience, we're talking about how different our audiences are.
Yeah.
I think you have a lot of people in your 30s listening. I have a lot of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s even, that are attending the summits. And so they might be listening and wonder, like, why should I care about this? What's the big deal? Well, I think that if you're in your 30s, you might not care as much about midlife, because you think that the best is not yet to come. It's that you're living your best life right now. But eventually, I mean, pretty soon you're going to hit a wall. You're going to maybe hit a spiritual wall. You're going to go through a dark night of the soul. You're going to go into a cocoon. And the good news is that all of these things are natural, normal things. And if you don't realize that there are natural, normal things in life, you're going to hit a crisis. You are going to get depressed in your 40s. And so I think that, especially if you're in your 30s, you need a summit like this. You need to be talking about midlife and beyond. You need to be talking about death in the second half of life, because we need to normalize the things that people are going through in midlife as just natural occurrences. And that when you get through those things, that the U curve of happiness starts to have an effect and you start to get happier. So I think hopefully that's encouraging to some of the people that are listening.
I'd love to talk about the idea of the crest of the hill, because it is one thing to get to the summit, as it were, and to begin looking down. It's not to be neglected to say you actually, from that space, do get a chance to look backwards as well. And that's been my experience. I did have a crash kind of around 40. I'm 49 now, when I had 3 parents die, lost the careers that I was really hoping would characterize my life, and I get a lot of my value out of what I build and create. And getting to a spot where a lot of things are crumbling can, as you were saying, real difficult for me. The things that looking backwards that I've really noticed now is how much of a foundation of my present happiness is built in my late 20s and 30s, and just busting it so hard during those seasons, even though some of the stuff that I was doing fell apart. Investments in family, investments in my spouse, investments in my community, these just have continually paid long-term profits, and have really set up what I experience as well, that things are just getting so much easier the older I get. Do you experience that? You're 43. So, so things getting easier for you, Tyler?
Well, one of the speakers on the summit said, the first half of life is one big experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be encouraging, because if we've made some mistakes, if we've had some regrets, if we've had some failures, it's normal. I mean, we're still experimenting because there's still so much life to be lived. And yeah, Jeff, I think a lot of people have that same experience where if you're in your late 30s or your 40s, and the thing that you've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20 years all of a sudden crumbles or it ends, then you sort of start to hit that midlife crisis because you think, well, now it's over. But you don't realize that you have 2 or 3 times more seasons left to follow your dreams. And that was one of the most incredibly encouraging thing about the panels, is to hear these type 9s that started something new when they were like 57. Or
procrastinating a bit, is that what you're saying?
Anne, who became an Enneagram coach in her 80s.
Yeah.
Or, all these, it was incredible because I was asking, okay, when did you start that business? Like, when did you do this? And they're like, well, I was 57. I was 65. They're taking these huge risks and doing the dreams that have been in their hearts since their 20s and 30s. They're seeing these dreams come to fruition finally in the second half of life. But when they were 40, they had no clue that they were about to do these things. They might have been depressed that the 30s didn't work out the way that they wanted to. So I just have so many case studies now of people who have gone for it and taken risks and are seeing their dreams fulfilled in the second half of life. And I hope that's encouraging to the people watching. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh, it absolutely does. And this gets into Enneagram type. How you interpret what you're experiencing really matters. And it's probably going to come out of your type in large measure. How I look back at the first half of my life, the things that are most important to me has really shifted as I've gotten older, and it's been entirely colored by my oneness and how I wrestle as a one with myself in the world as an embodied person, and thinking about the story that I'm living out and what that story looks like moving forward. I love what I'm hearing from you, which seems to be a very optimistic way of embracing where you're at. And 3 that you are, let's reframe why we're actually winning when we enter our 40s and 50s and 60s. We don't need to lose here. But a lot of us, I think, really need that injection of energy and perspective, because I don't know if you've experienced this, but like the thoughts of mortality have become different for me. Like I've known that I'm going to die. I wrote a book on death. But after you see parents go, or after you see parents get very sick for a stretch and go, it hits a little bit different. I really need that reminder of, okay, what's this season look like? So how do you come to those sorts of topics?
Death is a hard one, but I don't feel like I don't have any wisdom to share. That's why I did the summit, so I could connect you to people who have wisdom. And the thing that I heard was that, death makes us appreciate life so much more, that having those endings causes us to find significance in in the relationships that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the loss helps us to appreciate, how much people meant to us, our spouses, our family members, our parents who have passed away. And that if we just all lived forever, you're a philosopher. So, I mean, the thought experiment of if we just all live forever, on this planet never died, then that would make life significantly different. And our experience of life would be significantly different. But because we have pets that pass away, or parents and loved ones, it causes us to feel things we've never would have felt if we just kind of all just live forever. So,
Love that.
Yeah. And yeah, but even though death, you think that death would be people would want to talk about it in this topic. It was one of the least requested topics.
Sure.
When I did a pre-summit poll, because I found, people in their 70s a lot of them aren't thinking about death, because I think no matter what age you are, you just never think that death is coming for you. So death is still one of those really, really difficult topics that people, don't really want to talk about or think about.
I suppose I get real systemic on this front, and it's been helpful of like kind of outlining, here's my 50s, here's my 60s, here's my 70s, here's my 80s. I really want to write a book on Blaise Pascal. I'm choosing not to do that for 30 years, because I'm going to lose a lot of my capacity to do other stuff. And so like when all that's done, I'm going to be sitting around, and I want some projects that I can actually put my mind to. They're going to bring me some joy in those latter stages. But yeah, I'm very aware now of not putting things off the way that I was very inclined to, especially in my 30s and early 40s, because I was building a business that I needed to lean into. I don't know, like thinking through life in stages. This is a huge part, it seemed to me, of the work that you're doing here. Is that a helpful task?
Do you mean stages by age groups or decades?
So for one of the things that I heard was that a lot of people don't realize that they're entering a new stage with new skills, that Jungian, sage stage. And I found that valuable in terms of some of the stuff that I've looked at that you're promoting.
Yeah. You'll tend to have less of a midlife crisis if you realize that role changes, those things are natural, and that it's natural to lose your cognitive abilities and your bodily stamina and all of those things. Because midlife, as Alice Froling put it, is full of holy losses and holy invitations. So it's filled with lots of invitations for new things that you maybe never had thought about before, but there's also a lot of losses. And it's just sort of embracing the losses and the gains that come with aging. And Arthur Brooks wrote a really fascinating book called From Strength to Strength. I tried to get him on the summit, but he's pretty busy. But he wrote a book called From Strength to Strength that's really, really helpful, because he says you have to come to terms with the fact that even in your 40s, your body will not work the same. It won't have as much energy. You're going to maybe not be able to play an instrument that as sharp as you used to in your 20s. Like all of your sort of faculties are going to start declining already in your 40s. And so the first chapter of his book is very depressing. But he says if you come to terms with that and realize that you're actually going to move from strength to another strength, then you can have a lot of hope. So he says, yes, you're not going to be able to be an engineer with the quick of a mind that you used to have. Maybe you can't do math problems as fast, or you can't think on your feet as fast like you used to. So yeah, if you're a musician playing an instrument or an engineer, like you're going to start to feel like you can't keep up with or do as much as you did when you were in your late 20s, early 30s. But realize that when midlife comes, you can move to another kind of strength, and that strength is more like wisdom. So kind of moving from like skills to wisdom, because as you get older, you start to have all of these experiences, you have these failures, you have these experiments that you've tried, quite a bit by the time you get to your 50s and especially your 60s. And so instead of becoming elderly, you can become an elder. You can be a wise sage with all of this wisdom and all of these experiences, and you can start to impart that to the younger generations. And if you can step into that mantle of elder rather than becoming elderly, then you realize, no, I can step up into leadership positions. I can take on these roles and have a major influence. I don't have to slip into irrelevancy or thinking that no one cares about me anymore, that my gifts aren't valuable anymore. But no, there's lots of space in corporate America and churches and nonprofits for wise elders to step up and to lead. Does that make sense?
It does. What's coming to my mind as you're talking is we talked off mic about the Enneagram centers. And I suppose if I was going to overlap that with what we might expect as we grow older, it's interesting to me in terms of there's a decline in your physical strength at some level, probably a decline in your cognitive strength at some level. I'm not sure that that's what happens to your relational aptitudes. But as you're talking, I was thinking through that element of if I'm a body type who really is used to engaging the world physically first, or if I'm a head type, I'm used to coming to the world with my mind first, and I find it slipping in how that would affect my sense of self and the rest and how I might pivot toward other things. But I do see so many of the people who are older in my life in their 70s, pushing into their 80s, really hammering and moving into much more of a relational way of being in the world because those other two centers are kind of slipping. I don't know if that pings for you, but that's what I see.
Yeah. And it's possible for people in their 30s to become a wise sage quickly. But it's not that attainable, because a lot of what I'm hearing from the sages is that they had to run into walls. They had to run into all these roadblocks to realize that their strategy, their Enneagram type strategy, was no longer serving them or helping them. And once they ran into enough of those problems in life, then they were able to move past those things. And the threes that don't like feelings start to slow down and start to feel their feelings, or sevens realize that going fast all the time was actually causing the wheels to come off all the time, and so they started to slow down and savor rather than think about what's next. And so that's the beauty of aging. That's an invitation, is you start to have all these experiences that show you your Enneagram type's ego. And then you have a fork in the road of I can keep going this way, or I can head in a new direction.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just cannot get that in your 20s and 30s. It's really hard. Some people in their 20s and 30s might experience loss or deaths in the family, or things that sort of are life lessons earlier. But a lot of the sages told me that they didn't start really learning things or growing until later. And that just makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. What I hear there, I suppose what I expect as well, is that we kind of, on the ego side, we get so used to the excesses of our type that we start to kind of get nauseated by them a little bit and say this isn't working, or we experience it not working. And we really pivot a little bit much more toward balance, which in my view is actually the target anyway. And as you're talking about threes and sevens aging in particular, that getting in touch with feelings later on is that balancing process. And what ends up happening is, because that hasn't been discovered, put language to by that individual, it comes out very fresh and filled with a lot of energy. And I always find, I think there's some wisdom here, that the people who have the most interesting thinking are the thinking repressed types. I think those who have the most interesting feelings are the feeling repressed types. And so too, the action repressed. When nines get into their body, when fives get into their body, when fours get into their body, they do some incredible things. And I suppose that's why I'm hearing in your discoveries.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that for those who are younger and listening, that aging and getting older can actually be a really good thing.
Yeah.
Because it's going to allow you to integrate all three centers just through lived experience. Mm-hmm. That if you're a head type, that more feelings are going to come, and there's more opportunities for integration there. If you just stay on the journey of life.
Yeah.
And don't fear getting older, but embrace it. It actually is going to cause you to be somebody who moves from, as Alice Freiling says, move from production to fruit, from productivity to fruitfulness. And when you start just getting out of the doing of the early years, and you start to integrate all three centers like you teach so well, Jeff, then there's fruit that pops up in your life, the fruit of joy, peace, patience, the things that we've been taught, and you just become somebody who's just people like being around.
Yeah.
Because we don't like being around unhealthy Enneagram types. But yeah, so moving from doing and to fruitfulness, that was one of the things that struck me from Alice Freiling's interview. Oh, and she also she came from a Christian perspective, and she used the parable of Jesus turning water into wine, and Jesus at the wedding party and saving the best wine for last.
Yeah.
And she's like, that's the truth that I experience. I'm in my 80s now, and Jesus saves the best for last. So I was like, oh, that's so good to hear, Alice. It's so good to hear.
It is good to hear. Especially for those of us, I suppose, if your body, before we do, I really want to move to generational shifts, but before I do, for those who find, did you talk to anyone whose body began to really fail them in a sickness way? Because I imagine that would really work against the best is last. I suppose that's what I would assume, but that might not be true. There may be some people who are getting, sicker or really having a hard time with their physicality and yet still report that things are getting better in other spaces.
Oh gosh, that was a constant theme on the panels that I did. I was almost every person I talked to was like, yeah, I went through breast cancer. I was told I was had a 10% chance of living. So many near-death experiences from people on the panels. Shocking. And yeah, they made it through. They made it through, and they shared about the profound and spiritual experiences that they had of feeling a sense of calm and peace through the storm and then making it through. So you're exactly right. So I think what's also great about listening to these sages is, so if you're 9, for example, and you're listening to another 9 go through the worst fear that a 9 has, or maybe you're 6 and your worst case scenarios do come true and they do happen, to hear these people saying, yeah, it happened to me and I'm okay. Like I didn't crumble, but I made it and I'm fine. And I'm actually a more whole person now. Like, listening to those stories are just so helpful for the younger generations to think, okay, if these things happen, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's really well said. All right. I want to talk about generations and generational shifts. Zach will be familiar with the fact that we just finished Generations trio of podcasts on Z, millennials, and X. Your guests, however, are going to constitute, I assume, a bunch of boomers. Got some silent generation. Don't know if you were privileged enough to talk to greatest generation. My grandfather, I knew all my grandparents real well, all greatest generation. My father-in-law is a silent generation, and my parents are all boomers. I suppose just big picture wise, did any thoughts on those 3 generations?
Yeah, I think what was really interesting is that Antonia Dodge and John Mark Witt, who I interviewed, they tied the different generations to certain kinds of archetypes. So the silent generation being artists, the boomers being prophets, the Gen Xers being nomads, the millennials being heroes, and Gen Zs being artists, because they say that it goes in cycles. Every 80 to 100 years, there's sort of a new cycle. And so it's interesting knowing that the silent generations are from 1925 to 1942 ish. If you're born then, have similarities to the Gen Zs that are being, born more recently. But yeah, I think since there's a lot of boomers that are coming to the summit, and then a lot of people who are listening to your podcast who are 30s, who have parents or grandparents who are boomers, I think this is going to be helpful, because I love this whole idea of generational archetypes, of figuring out, okay, there's patterns that we can learn from it with the Enneagram, with our personality. There's also patterns in generations. And I just love that. What can we learn from these generations? And they, in my interview, they said that the boomers are prophets and that they grew up in a like culturally a sort of a springtime, to use spring as a metaphor. And so every 80 to 100 years there's like a spring, summer, fall, winter that happens every 20 years ish. And that the boomers grew up in sort of a cultural spring. There was a lot of life. They born into an age of awakening or after World War II. And so in the 60s and 70s, they were sort of rose to the occasion of being prophets. They defined values. They were the leaders of the civil rights. They were protesting Vietnam. There was an evangelical explosion with Billy Graham and Bill Bright with Campus Crusade that I was a part of, and they filled up stadiums. So they were the prophets. And the reason why I think the younger generations might struggle with the boomers is that the boomers were given a prophetic voice going all the way back to the 60s and really given space to tell us how things should be. To use sort of a Enneagram one-ish kind of example, the shoulds. So this is what we should think about civil rights. This is what we should think about spiritual truth in the Bible. This is what we should think about, how we should think about politics. And now that the boomers are in, the last third of their life or last quarter of their life, they might still expect people in the younger generations to listen to their shoulds. So younger generations might experience boomers as bossy or too pushy, and boomers might have a hard time with that because they might experience a sense of irrelevance, or that the younger generations don't want to listen to their prophetic voice, that their voice no longer matters. And so that, I think, is kind of a huge dynamic that's really insightful, don't you think?
I do. I have a nomad Gen Xer that I am. The thing that has troubled me most, and especially you had brought up kind of you and I embrace the same like religious tradition growing up, was in my experience how much the prophetic boomers were speaking when I was in my formative years, and how much their messages they themselves have turned against in my experience. And I find this deeply unsettling. And it's one of those things I don't know what to do with. And as you're saying, they're still saying their shoulds. There becomes a real challenge for our culture in general, in terms of saying, which voice should we listen to? The one that you were saying in the 80s and 90s, in which character mattered, in which equality mattered, in which we were pushing against the boomer generation, was showing the limits of the pursuit of financial success and saying, friends, there is a ceiling that you hit, and we need to back it off and really invest in relationships. There is some stuff that, as a collective, I would want to, at least in my experience, a lot of the boomer voices seem to pivot off of the messages that we're hearing from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Do you have thoughts on that?
No, I just appreciate. I'm just listening and learning from what you're saying, and that makes a lot of sense. And again, we're not harping on boomers because I just said, I just talked to tons of boomers with incredible stories and incredible wisdom and incredible softness to them. I think about what C.S. Lewis said, and he said something to the effect like, if you're a cynical person and then you go on into eternity, like you'll increasingly and exponentially become more and more cynical. Like what would, like that thought of experiment of what if a cynical person just never stops becoming more cynical? Yeah. I mean, it just become a horrible person. And so sometimes boomers now that have lived a lot of life, some of them are crusty and really, really stubborn. And then there's the kind of boomers that have become softer and less rigid and more open-minded and less certain about the things they used to be certain about, live with more grayscale. They're beautiful people, and I've gotten to talk with a lot of them. And
Yeah,
likewise,
I'm painting with a very large brush, obviously,
yeah,
because that's
yeah,
a 20-year worth of human beings that constitute, I'm sure, millions and millions of at least Americans in my culture.
What if the 30 somethings that thought that they know everything and that life will never get worse, so they'll never get older, and they're just like in their prime? What if they were to say, you know what, I do realize that I'm going to hit a wall at some point here. I do realize that I'm in my prime of work or whatever, but I realize that the, there's more to life than this, that there's going to be pain, there's going to be things that happen. So why don't I sit down and carve out space in my life to listen to these elders? Like that would be just tremendous if they became more open-hearted to listen to sages. John Izzo, one of the world-class speakers on the summit, said that he went to a tribe in Africa, and they have like a council of elders. They're not paid. They're just a council of elders. And that whenever anybody in the town or the tribe has a problem or an issue, they would go to this council of elders to get wisdom and to get help on making decisions. And
Yeah.
one of the tribal elders said, well, how does it work in America?
Right.
He's like, very sheepishly said, well, that's young people don't listen to old people, the older people, the elders. And he's like, that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. Like, you need to go back to your country now and do something about that. And
that
so I
pings
think,
for me. That pings for me is really true and how it should be. Interview you did with Witt and Dodge, which I got to listen to, is fantastic, by the way. Like you all have to find this. These are the fine folks who do Personality
Hacker is their brand. Yeah.
This interview is stellar. Well done, by the way. In bringing up seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter, what unfortunately appeared to be happening, and at least as in my experience, as I listen to my kids, as I listen to, Katie Whitlock on our Gen Z podcast talk, is that they are in the winter and looking and saying, why are we in the winter? And their fingers point immediately to these prophets. And why would I want to listen to them? They handed me a dysfunctional world in which I have zero power, which I can't afford a house, and in which, the anxiety surrounding the responses to things like COVID. And as you may know, Gen Z has a severe uptick in anxiety, depression, and suicide rates. And all of it seems to be like, why are we here? And unfortunately, or not, the boomer generation gets a lot of the blame for this. I was hoping for your wisdom there, because I think it should be the case that we're asking older people what's up, but that's the world that we live in. So do you have any thoughts there?
Well, the boomers are in the position of, they are the elders now. And I think we always look upwards to, whether we're at our workplace or what, we look to the managers, the people above us, and be like, it's their fault.
Yeah.
So, when the millennials get to that place of elder, or the Gen Zs, they're going to take a lot of heat, no matter what generation is in that elder seat.
One of the most disturbing things, it seems to me, about my generation, my tendencies, I feel this, is how anti-institutional we are. And when we get power, we actually go down that road and we pull down institutions. And the amount of energy against religion, against the press, against federal government, and we could make a long list of things that my generation is very suspicious of, that it is, when given leverage, is just going to light it on fire and think that it's self-sufficient. We saw this severely during COVID, and the suspicion of the medical industry strikes me as buffoonish. Yet my generation has that zeitgeist of, we just don't trust you. And it's disheartening to me on some fronts. I don't know how you recapture that, though. Like, if you burn down this is what deconstruction is, and why it's so severe in my generation, and it's kind of lagged. But deconstruction is about pulling everything down. And so one of the things I just love the hell out of that interview was thinking of 80-year cycles in how things get pulled down and rebuilt and pulled down and rebuilt. And unfortunately, this is how, fortunately or not, this is how humanity works. And so they went back, we're in 2025 at the height of winter. And it may be the case that a lot of us feel like things are getting pulled down. But if you went 80 years before, we're right in the middle of World War II when the world got reconstructed after that. If you go back 80 years before that, we are in the midst of a civil war. If you go back 80 years back from that, we are, fighting a revolutionary war and creating some founding documents. That is terrifying to me on one front. I don't know how you push away from that, because so many of us think that it is time to rebuild something, but we need dear God, we need some good people to lead to get us there.
That was encouraging from that interview to say, yeah, we're actually in a winter period right now, symbolically or metaphorically. And so technically spring, theoretically, spring should be coming. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but spring should be coming. That's really cool. And
I believe the Martin book is Dreams of Spring, but winter is coming is definitely the saying, the saying that it might be a mess.
But isn't that crazy to think about, that the silent generation, those who are like 80 to 100?
Yeah, I love this. Talk about this.
Have similarities with the Gen Xers, like my
or with
kids.
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Yeah.
Like, think about television and radio, like all of that artist generation created TV and created new media outlets that were innovative, and radio. And now we have, my kids who are Gen Zers who are on TikTok and CapCut and now have AI and have these tools to be the next storytellers of our generation, to do creative things like those the silent generation did 100 years ago. That's kind of cool. That's just really fascinating to me.
I love that as a pivot to optimism, that what is next is an invitation for those who are young to take up a place of recreation, rebuilding. What got named in your interview was like, the Beatles are not boomers. The Beatles precede the boomers. They're silent generation, but they're singing the songs that entire generation picked up and internalized and found their sense of self. Like, nearly everyone who is leading those 1960s protest movements are actually silent generation, because they're older than those who are actually the audience. And and that's formative and worthwhile, that if the theory holds, my kids' generation, your kids' generation are going to be those who create the new world, as it were. And that's where we're going.
It's amazing. But yeah, there's so much that we can't explain because it is a generational theory. But yeah, you can go listen to that interview. I'm glad you really enjoyed it. And I was hoping that others would enjoy nerding out like me on that topic.
It's so good. But how you, like, I would love to ask you this question on, like, how generations, the tools, TV, moving from TV to internet to the phone to AI, the tools that characterize your generation and how your brain works. And this is going to be one of the things that I think is interesting. I would be curious if you heard anything in your interviews of, the world is moving so fast. What is it that those who have some years behind them, have some wisdom, what do they have to say to those who are just now self-actualizing? You know what I mean?
We didn't really cover that topic. It's a really good one. What we did cover was, in all the panels, was, what would you say to your younger self?
Mm-hmm.
And that was really helpful. And there's a lot of tears. There's a lot of tears of, if I were to go back to my 13-year-old self when my mother died, and seeing my 13-year-old self navigate that, this is what I'd say to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of like encouragement and going back and showing a lot of empathy and compassion for your younger self. Even those who are in their 30s can do that too. Like, the teen years were hard, figuring out your identity and now with social media, a lot of the younger people listening had to go through using social media in high school. Imagine how hard that would be for us, like millennials, if we had social media and all the bullying and the things that happened, the texting, and that would be incredibly hard. So go back and have compassion for your younger self. That is just an awesome exercise. But yeah, we didn't get to like what would the older generation say to the younger generation.
I think that's a great message. The thing that has come out for me in this whole the generational study is how physical and environmental the struggles of past generations were, whereas how internal so much of the struggles of present generations seems to be. My father-in-law was born on a dirt floor with an abusive mom, and all he wanted, he put a goal in his wallet when he was young that says, I want to be able to afford butter. Those are so environmental. I didn't have that kind of experience, and my kids certainly don't. But they struggle in a certain kind of way as well. And as we enter this new space that's so digital, and the desire, like, what can we learn from generations past in this new digital age? That's what's kind of primary on my mind if I were looking for lessons. Do you have any wisdom or thoughts as given this study?
The study
On what's getting handed, I suppose here I'm finding this so often right now that I'm like many of us, I just feel like we're drowning a little bit, and I'm like trying to reach who's got the thing, who's got the wisdom. I just saw Paul Thomas Anderson's new movie, and it set up everything perfectly. This is how the world is dysfunctional, and it gave no prescriptions. There were no shoulds, as it were. There were no, in the midst of calamity, how do you navigate? How do you navigate the winter? And I suppose for my heart, I'm really struggling there. So maybe that's why all my questions are pushing into cynicism and doubt and struggle.
Well, yeah, prior to this summit, I was feeling a lot of negative emotions, and now I feel way more at peace because I don't think I would have volunteered to go out and create space to listen to elders if my audience hadn't said, this is the summit that we want. We want a summit on midlife and beyond on the second half of life. And so that kind of helped guide me towards this. And it turned out to be a fantastic gift because, as you said, we do go through cycles of fall, winter, spring, summer. And for those listening, we're going to experience those seasons all throughout life. And when winter comes, we are going to crumble. We are going to get cynical. We are going to get depressed if we don't know that it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But to hear people who have lived through through 4 winters, through 6 winters, through midlife crisis, who have gone into the dark night of the soul, who have been in the cocoon when it was really, really dark for a decade, and then emerged as a butterfly into a totally new kind of transformed person. Unless we hear from those people, we're not going to have the resilience to get through the winters, and we're not going to be filled with hope and encouragement that the best is yet to come.
Yeah.
That the second half of life can be the best half of life, and that there's more opportunities and more dreams that we're gonna pursue, and that we have so many years left. I mean, granted, a crisis can happen to anybody, or cancer, or death, but the truth is that, yeah, like I said, the next generation is living 20 years longer, and when the millennials and the Gen X, the Gen Zers, like, we might live to over 100. Who knows? Like,
Right.
that means we have to stop thinking about retiring at 64, or like, no, it's going to be a time of refiring. It's a time of, wow, there's going to be so many more opportunities, so many more years left to accomplish our dreams. And so hopefully that is encouraging to those watching today and causes all of us to create space for more elders in our life.
Right. As you're talking, the thing that's really challenging to me, because you'll hear it in my language of how, like, outwardly focused I am on things that I can't control, or that seemingly that may not have a whole lot of importance. These sorts of conversations, especially hearing from voices who are more wise, is that they're able to identify what's important, what's valuable. And so often it's what's right in my hands. It's these are the moments that you have with your healthy wife. These are the moments you have with your kids while they're still at home. These are the moments that you have where you don't realize how valuable it is to have dinner with these people after a hard day, that these would be experiences that they would give thousands of dollars to experience again, kind of things. And I know what that's like. Like I would absolutely, sell a car to have 2 days with my 2-year-olds, 2-year-old and 1-year-old, and those are the sorts of things that really invigorate me and remind me to get out of my prescriptive one that I am, ranting about the world and all of its ills and to just be. And I always find these sorts of conversations really valuable. So I'm trepidatious in signing up for the Midlife Summit. And I know it would be fantastic for my heart if I actually get through some of this, and you're the man to lead us there. And I'm just so thrilled for your work. You just continue to do grert work, Tyler. And
thanks, man.
Thankful for you.
Thank you so much. And there's a lot for everyone at the summit. And there's some good warnings too. Like for ones, the theme is there's no one right way to do midlife. And to give yourself a break, it's not a process you can go through step by step. Life is just going to happen, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to pay the learning tax. But hey, the first half of life is just one big experiment. And for me as the 3, I started to go from sort of dark cynicism to the wrong kind of path. We're like, okay, now I have all these new goals to pursue as a 3.
Right.
Now
right.
I can work to get my metabolic age down 10 years. I can turn it into an opportunity to win.
tells you daily.
I'm like, no, that's Tyler. That is not the way to think about the second half of life. You thought that you can conquer and win more goals. No, like that's not what. And actually, one of the things that's kind of cool and about that experience was just sitting down with older type 3s. I was like, wow, this is an incredible experience. And Pastor Dale Griffin said that somebody had told him at one point they had gifted him a turtle as a 3, and that the turtle reminded him to slow down. And just having that one conversation now has changed my last month, because I went on Amazon. I bought myself a little turtle figurine that now sits on my computer speaker. And now when my son comes in, who's super excited about his TikTok video that he made, then I look at the turtle, and the turtle is looking at me and is like, slow down, Tyler, stop what you're doing and engage with your son. And so it's already paying off, having these wonderful conversations with elders. And so I know that those watching and or listening, if you register for the summit and engage in some of these conversations, it will change the second half of your life if you create space for it.
It's lovely. It's a good word, my man. Well, I'm cheering for you. The link for Tyler's Midlife Summit is in the show notes, so do click on that before you sign off of this podcast and take a look at all the good things. You may think that this is going to be incredibly expensive to get all of this stuff. The man gives it away for free for 4 days. Yeah?
Yep. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, is if you're running low on funds, I've spent the last 4 months working full time to create this summit, and you can get lifetime access to it for only $49 is the early bird price. So there's a lot that comes with that $49. But the good news is, if you're strapped for funds, you can watch it all for free. October 21st through the 24th. All the sessions are going to be available each day for just over 24 hours. So you can catch your favorite sessions. And so go use Jeff's link below to register, and I'll see you there.
Russ Hudson, Suzanne Stabile, Whit and Dodge, and the Tyler Zach, all there to be enjoyed. My brother, it's always great catching up with you. I am just so thrilled about the sort of work that you're putting into the world, and I'm cheering hard for you, boss.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation, and just thank you so much for spreading the word about the summit. I appreciate you.